Welcome to POV Stories. This one is unlike anything you've read here before. Pay attention to every detail. You meet her on a Wednesday afternoon in October in the reading room of the New York Public Library on Fifth Avenue, which is either the most romantic place in the city to meet someone or the most cliched, depending on your tolerance for beauty that announces itself. You are 32 years old, from Charlottesville, Virginia, and you are sitting at one of the long oak tables surrounded by your research materials. You are an architectural historian writing a book about mid-century modernism in American civic buildings, when someone sits down across from you and opens a book so large and so precisely held that you notice the hands before you notice anything else. Long fingers. The particular deliberate quality of someone who handles books the way a surgeon handles instruments. You look up. She does not look up. She is reading with the complete absorption of someone for whom the room has ceased to exist except for the page in front of her. You go back to your work. You are there for 3 more hours. She is there for 4. When she finally stands to leave, she gathers her materials with the same deliberate precision she brought to opening the book, nothing hurried, nothing careless. And as she passes your end of the table, she glances at your spread of photographs and drawings and says, without stopping, in English that is accented and exact, "The Saarinen Terminal." 2 words. Referring to the TWA Flight Center at JFK, which is indeed what is in the photograph on top of your stack. You say yes. She says, still not quite stopped. The way he thought about movement as architecture. Not the building containing the movement, but the movement being the building. And then she is past your table and moving toward the door, and you are sitting there with the specific feeling of someone who has just been handed something and needs a moment to understand what it is. You do not catch up to her that day. You go back the following Wednesday. And the Wednesday after that. On the 3rd Wednesday she is at the same table, and she looks up when you sit down, and she says, "The TWA historian." You say, "The Saarinen expert." She says, "I am not an expert. I am interested." There is a difference. You will learn that this distinction, between expertise claimed and interest earned, is one she makes constantly and seriously, because she comes from a world where credentials are performed and she has decided to perform nothing. Her name is Leila Al-Mansuri. She is 29 years old and she is in New York on a fellowship at Columbia's Graduate School of Architecture, Planning and Preservation, studying the relationship between Islamic geometric tradition and contemporary sustainable design. She is from Abu Dhabi. Her father, Khaled, is the kind of man whose name opens rooms, a figure in the UAE's cultural infrastructure, involved in the development of the Saadiyat Island Cultural District, a man who has spent his career arguing that the future of the Gulf is inseparable from the quality of its built environment. Her mother, Fatima, is a woman whose social intelligence is so complete and so precise that she once described it to Leila as the ability to understand what a room needs before the room knows itself. Leila has an older brother, Hammad, 32, who works in finance in Dubai and who is the family's pragmatist, the one who speaks plainly in a family that often speaks in implication and metaphor. She has a grandmother, Miriam, who is 78 and who lives in the family compound in Abu Dhabi and who is, Leila will tell you much later, the person whose opinion has mattered more than anyone else's in every significant decision of her life. You have coffee for the first time on a Thursday in November, at a small place on Amsterdam Avenue that Leila chose, which you will understand later was deliberate. She chooses the geography of new things carefully, always somewhere that belongs to either of you, neutral ground. She orders Arabic coffee, the cardamom kind, which the place happens to carry, and she looks at you with the expression you will spend the next year learning to read, direct, assessing, warm in a way that is not performed, curiosity that has no agenda. She asks about your book. You explain. She asks questions that demonstrate she has been thinking about the intersections of architecture and civic identity for longer and more rigorously than your question implied, and you find yourself in a conversation that goes 2 hours past the coffee and ends only because she has a seminar. The months that follow are their own education. You learn that Leila moves through New York with a specific quality of attention. She sees buildings the way other people see people, reading their intentions, their contradictions, their aspirations and failures. She takes you to see the Seagram building on a gray afternoon and stands across the street from it for a long time and says, "Mi's understood that restraint is not the absence of ambition. It is the most disciplined form of it." You write it down. You quote it in your book, with her permission, in a footnote she edits for precision. You learn that she prays, quietly and without announcement, and that her faith is the kind that is interior and structural rather than performed, the way a building's load-bearing walls are invisible but everything depends on them. You learn that she calls her mother every evening at 9, Abu Dhabi time, which is 6 in the morning New York time, which means she is awake at 6 every morning in a way that initially surprises you and that you eventually understand is the organizing principle of her day, the call first, then everything else. You learn that she misses the light in Abu Dhabi with the specific ache of someone who has lived most of her adult life in northern cities and who carries the Gulf light inside her like a reference point against which all other light is measured and found slightly insufficient. You fall in love with her in the way you fall in love with things that are genuinely more complex than you are, gradually, with increasing humility, and then all at once on a specific Tuesday evening in January when she is explaining something about Muqarnas, the honeycomb vaulting in Islamic architecture, using a series of photographs on her laptop. And she looks up mid-sentence, and catches you not looking at the photographs but at her, and neither of you says anything, and then she looks back at the photographs and continues the sentence, and you understand that the sentence continuing is its own form of acknowledgement. You tell her you are in love with her on a Saturday morning in February, in her apartment on 120th Street, over the Arabic coffee she makes every morning in the dalla, the long-spouted pot, which she keeps on the counter with the same deliberateness she brings to everything. She listens to you say it. She sets down her coffee. She says, "I know." Then she says, "I need you to understand something before this goes further." You say, "Of course." She says, "I am not from a world where this is simple. I am from a family where who you love is not only about who you love. It is about what the love requires. What it asks of everyone around you. What it means for people who are not in this room." You say you understand. She says, "You understand it now. You will understand it differently when you meet my father." The fellowship ends in May. She goes home to Abu Dhabi for the summer. You maintain the particular sustained attention of two people who have decided to take something seriously across 7,000 miles and 8 time zones. Calls, messages, the slow building of a life that exists partially in the space between two cities. You fly to Abu Dhabi in August. This is not casual. This is, as Leila has made clear in the weeks before your arrival, a visit that carries weight. She has spoken to her parents. Her father knows you are coming. Her mother knows you are coming. Her grandmother, Miriam, knows you are coming, and this last fact, Leila tells you on the phone the night before your flight, is the one that matters most. Abu Dhabi in August is not what you have been told and more than you imagined. The heat is not like any heat you have known, it is not aggressive, it is simply total, a complete atmospheric fact, the city existing inside it with the particular calm of a place that has made its peace with an extreme condition. The light is what Leila described, the specific quality of Gulf light at certain hours, the way it falls flat and golden on the stone-colored buildings, the way the water of the Gulf catches it in the late afternoon, and holds it. You understand, landing, why she carries it inside her as a reference point. Leila meets you at the airport. She is wearing a white abaya over her clothes, which you have not seen her in before, and she looks at you with the expression that is hers, the direct, assessing, warm without performing expression, and she says, "Welcome to where I'm from." And you understand that the sentence has weight beyond hospitality. She is showing you something. She is watching to see how you receive it. The Al-Mansuri family home is in a compound in a residential neighborhood of Abu Dhabi that has the particular quality of ordered, considered space. The architecture deliberately referencing Gulf vernacular tradition while being entirely contemporary, the date palms in the courtyard old enough to have been planted by a previous generation. A garden that is not the English garden of abundance but the desert garden of sufficiency, each plant specific, chosen, maintained with the precise attention of someone who understands that in this climate, to grow something is an act of intention. Khaled meets you in the majlis, the formal sitting room, which is everything a formal sitting room in this context should be: geometric patterns on the walls and floor, the smell of oud incense, low seating, Arabic coffee and dates set out by someone who prepared for your arrival. He is 60 years old, tall, with the particular stillness of someone who has spent decades in rooms where every word has weight, and has learned to deploy his own words accordingly. He greets you in English. His English is impeccable, international, and his greeting is warm in the specific, measured way of a man who is expressing welcome as a deliberate choice rather than a social reflex. He shakes your hand and holds it a moment. He says, "Leila has told us a great deal about you." He pauses. "I have also read your book." You did not know this. The fact that he read your book, not because you are famous, you are not, but because Leila mentioned it, and he decided to understand her world, tells you something about the kind of man he is and the kind of father. The conversation in the majlis covers your work, your family, your understanding of Islamic architecture, which he tests gently, and which you pass by knowing the limits of your knowledge and saying so honestly, which Khaled receives with a slight nod that communicates he was testing for honesty as much as expertise. Then he asks you a question that is not in the category of polite conversation. He says, "What do you understand about what you are asking?" You say, "I understand I am asking for something that requires more than my feeling for your daughter. I understand it requires your trust, and your family's trust, and that trust is earned rather than assumed." He looks at you. He says, "And do you understand that she would be the one who navigates the distance? That the difficulty of this life would be distributed unevenly, and mostly toward her?" You say, "I understand that. I don't think I fully understand it yet. I believe the direction of my understanding matters." He is quiet for a moment. Then he says, "That is an honest answer." And he pours you more coffee, which in this context is its own form of statement. Fatima receives you in a different room, a sitting room that is less formal, warmer, with family photographs and the particular domestic comfort of a space that has been lived in rather than maintained. She is 58, with Leila's eyes and the specific quality of social intelligence Leila described, the ability to understand what a room needs before the room knows itself. She greets you with warmth that is genuine and complete, and that is also, underneath the warmth, the most thorough assessment you have ever undergone, conducted entirely through the asking of questions that sound like conversation and are actually inventory. She asks about your mother, your childhood, your relationship with your family, whether you cook, what you do on a Sunday when there is nothing you have to do. These questions are not small. They are the questions of a woman who understands that character is visible most clearly in the unguarded moments, and that a man's relationship with his ordinary life tells her more than anything he would choose to present. She says, at one point, with a smile that is warm and serious simultaneously, "Leila has never brought anyone home before." You say, "I know." She says, "Do you understand what that means?" You say, "I think it means she is serious." She says, "It means she is certain." Leila does not move toward things she is uncertain about. She waits. She considers. She decides. And then she moves. She pours you tea. She says, "The question I have been asking since she told me about you is not whether she is certain. It is whether you are." You tell her you are. She looks at you with the complete assessing warmth of someone who has been reading people for decades. She nods. Not the nod of someone who has decided. The nod of someone who has begun to decide. Miriam. You meet her on the second afternoon, in the courtyard of the compound under the date palms, where she is sitting in a chair with the particular stillness of someone who has earned the right to be entirely present in their own body. She is 78. She wears a black abaya and a shayla, and her face has the specific quality of someone whose features have been refined by decades of significant living into something that is more than beautiful. She looks at you when Leila brings you to her with the particular look of a woman who has been looking at people for 78 years and has stopped performing any part of the looking. She says something in Arabic to Leila. Leila translates. She says she wants to look at you for a moment. So she looks. You stand in the courtyard under the date palms in the August heat, and you are looked at by a woman who has outlived a husband and two of her siblings and watched a country transform from desert to metropolis in the span of her lifetime, and you try to be worth the looking. Miriam says something in Arabic. Layla's expression does something. She translates. She says, "He has the eyes of a man who pays attention. This is the only thing that matters." Then Miriam says something else, shorter, and Layla doesn't translate immediately. "You ask?" Layla says. She says, "Your father would have liked him." Her father. Khaled's father. Layla's grandfather, who died 12 years ago and whom Miriam still speaks of in the present tense of someone who has not fully agreed to the past tense. The days in Abu Dhabi arrange themselves into a form you did not expect, not a test, exactly, but a sustained and gentle education. Khaled takes you to the Louvre Abu Dhabi, which he was involved in developing, and he walks you through it with the focused attention of a man showing you something he loves, and you understand that this is partly about the museum and partly about being shown something that matters to understand who the family is. You stand under Jean Nouvel's extraordinary dome, the rain of light filtering through the geometric latticework, and you say, genuinely, not performing, that you have never seen anywhere that makes the argument for the universal and the particular simultaneously with this kind of clarity. Khaled looks at you. He says, "That is exactly what we wanted it to say." And something shifts between you, not warmth exactly, something more structural than warmth, the beginning of a shared language. Hammad takes you for coffee on the third day, just the two of you, at a cafe in the city that is resolutely local, no tourists, Arabic menu, a place where Hammad is known. He is pragmatic in the way Layla described, direct in the way of someone who has decided that directness is the most respectful thing he can offer. He says, "I am going to tell you what everyone else is saying more carefully." You say, "Please." He says, "She is the most capable person in our family. She is also the one who has always gone her own direction and made it work. We have learned to trust her judgment because her judgment has always been correct. So the question is not whether she has chosen well, she has. The question is whether you understand the size of what she is giving you." You say, "Tell me what you mean." He says, "I mean that she could have had a life here that was complete. Family, community, a career that is respected in a context that fully understands it. She is choosing instead a life that will always be partially elsewhere. Partially in translation. She is choosing to carry the distance." He drinks his coffee. He says, "I need to know that you know what she is putting down to pick you up." You tell him you know. You tell him you will spend the rest of your life making the weight of the carrying worth it to her. He looks at you for a moment. He says, "Good." A pause. "She said you would say something like that." You ask what she said? He smiles, the first full smile. He says, "She said you always find the true thing." The engagement happens not with a ring in a restaurant but in the majlis, with Khaled and Fatima and Hammad and Miriam present, and the formality of it is not stiff but ceremonial in the way of something that has its own logic and its own beauty, a thing being done in the right order, with the right people, in the right room. Which is the aesthetic of a culture that understands that the manner of a thing is inseparable from the meaning of it. Khaled speaks in Arabic first and then in English, which you understand is a gift, translating the ceremony into your language so that you are inside it rather than outside it. He says that he has watched you for 3 days and that what he has seen is a man who is attentive and honest, and who loves his daughter with the specific quality of love that sees rather than projects. He says this is what he wanted for her, not the particular origin or background that he might once have imagined, but this quality of seeing. He says, "A man who truly sees a woman will build the right life with her. The specific form of the life is secondary." He pauses. "I want you to know that you are welcome in this family not conditionally but completely. From this day." Miriam says something in Arabic when Khaled finishes. The room is quiet. Layla translates in a voice that is steady and slightly not steady simultaneously, which is the most emotion you have heard in her voice, which means it is significant. She says, "Khaled's father believed that a family grows by who it lets in." She says, "Let him in." You moved to Abu Dhabi 14 months later. This is not a sacrifice. This is a decision made with full understanding of what you are moving toward, a city that contains Leila completely, the light she carries as a reference point given back to her, the language of her childhood surrounding her again, the family whose gravity you have been learning to exist inside. You bring your research. You bring your book, which is now finished and which contains, in its acknowledgments, a sentence about the person who taught you that restraint is the most disciplined form of ambition. You build a life in Abu Dhabi that is yours and also hers and also both, an apartment in a building near the Corniche with views of the Gulf that change hourly, a community of architects and scholars and artists that Khaled introduces you to with the specific warmth of a father incorporating someone into the world he has spent decades building. You learn Arabic slowly, seriously, with the focused determination of someone who understands that language is not a courtesy but a form of respect. The wedding is in the family compound in January, when the Abu Dhabi winter is what a desert winter is, clear and mild and the light extraordinary, the date palms casting long shadows across the courtyard in the afternoon. There are 2 ceremonies, the nikah, the Islamic marriage contract, conducted by a sheikh who speaks with the specific gravity of someone performing something sacred and structural simultaneously, and a celebration afterward that goes until 2 in the morning and that contains music and food and the particular warmth of a family receiving someone not as an addition but as belonging. Your parents fly from Charlottesville. Your mother wears a dress that Leila helped her choose, which is one of the things you love about Leila. She anticipated your mother's uncertainty and moved toward it practically, with care and no condescension, which is how she loves everyone. Your father shakes Khaled's hand and says he has read about the Louvre Abu Dhabi in the Times, and Khaled says then you know the argument it makes, and your father says he thinks he does, and they spend 20 minutes talking about architecture and civic responsibility and the specific challenge of building institutions that outlast their creators, and you watch your 2 fathers find each other across the distance of everything that separates them, which is not nothing and is not insurmountable. Miriam sits at the edge of the courtyard in her chair under the date palm, and she watches everything with the complete, focused attention of someone for whom this is not a celebration but a confirmation of something she understood from the courtyard in August. When you go to her to say thank you, for the welcome, for the seeing, for the single Arabic sentence that unlocked the room, she takes your hand in both of hers and holds it, and says something in Arabic. Leila, beside you, translates quietly. She says, now you belong to the light here. It will not let you go. She is right. It will not let you go. The Gulf light in the early morning through the Corniche apartment window, the way it falls on Leila's face when she is on the phone with her mother at 6, the way it falls on the courtyard of the family compound on a Friday afternoon when everyone is there, and the date palms are doing what date palms do in the afternoon light of the Gulf. Which is to say something about permanence that you do not have words for in any language, and which you have stopped needing words for because you live inside it now. 2 years after the wedding you are in the apartment near the Corniche at 4 in the morning and Leila is asleep in the next room and you are holding your daughter, Nur, light, in Arabic, which is the name Miriam suggested and which was never going to be anything else, and walking the loop between the kitchen and the window and the Gulf is outside doing what the Gulf does at 4 in the morning, which is to be vast and dark and specific. Nur's eyes are open. They track the light from the water the way your eyes have been tracking it since you arrived. You think about the reading room on 5th Avenue and the 2 words, the Saarinen terminal, and the sentence about restraint and ambition that changed how you think about everything. You think about the courtyard and Miriam's look and the date palms and the specific quality of August heat that is not aggressive but total. You think about Khaled and the Louvre Abu Dhabi and the rain of light through the geometric dome and the sentence, that is exactly what we wanted it to say. You think about what Hammad said about carrying the distance. You think about what Leila put down to pick you up. You think about the size of that and the specific daily practice of being worth it, which is not a destination but a discipline, which you have understood from the beginning, which you understand more completely every morning at 6 when she is on the phone to her mother, and you make the coffee and you hear the specific warm frequency of a woman who is entirely at home in both of her worlds, which is what your being here made possible. Which is the thing you did that mattered most. Noor's hand closes around your finger. The Gulf is outside. The light will come in 2 hours. You do not move. If this one found you somewhere real, subscribe to POV Stories. Every story here is written for the thing you haven't had words for yet. The next one is already waiting.